So hi again, my name is Carol Sufi. I'm the market research analyst at Branch Food, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all today. By way of introduction, Branch Food is New England's leading community of food entrepreneurs launching and growing CPG, food tech, and ag tech startups. Since 2015, we've been hosting entrepreneurs in our co-working space in downtown Boston, and the co-working space is currently open if any of you is interested in office space. You can visit our website, branchfood.com, to sign up for the newsletter and check out our upcoming events and monthly community tables. If you're looking for business support, goals, consider applying. Today, we're thrilled to welcome food business expert Jim Verzino, who will lead our session on pricing for food. Jim helps entrepreneurs develop funding, set up their financial system, and understand cash flow, cost of sales, and growth. As an entrepreneur in residence at Freedom Grows and president of Food Creators Financial, Jim has worked with over 100 to raise $2.6 million as mentor practices. Jim will begin by sharing the methodology he learned from pricing in the high-tech industry and applying it to the food world. And he will then take any questions you have about pricing and your specific situation. So you can expect the presentation to last for about 10 minutes, and we'll have about 50 minutes of live. A couple of notes before we begin. The session is recorded, and the replay will be shared with all of you in email tomorrow. It will also be hosted on our YouTube channel, which is Branch Food. Some of you have submitted questions in the registration form ahead of time. I'll ask a few of them throughout the session. But once we open it up for live Q&A, please click on the raise your hand button on the bottom of the screen, and I will call you out to ask your question. If you're watching us on YouTube, please drop your questions in the comment section and we'll ask them to Jim. Also, Jim was kind enough to dedicate some time next week for those of you who would like to follow up with him. So we'll include the calendar link in the email tomorrow. And lastly, please keep yourself on mute throughout the session unless you're asking a question. And let's begin. Jim, can you please share your screen?
Sure. Before I do that, actually, Carol, at least for me, you kind of went in and out. So I just want to get people that are on video, if I get a thumbs up, if you can actually hear me. Okay, so we're all good there. All right, so now I will share my screen. Okay. Okay. All right, so people can see the presentation thing here. Yes, give me a thumbs up if you can. We're all good. Okay. All right. So as Carol said, I'm only going to be speaking for about 10 minutes. I'm from New York, so I do tend to speak kind of quickly. So I will try to keep my tone as good as I can for the sake of everyone. And sometimes I get speaking too fast, so I'll just try to avoid that if I can. But anyhow, we're going to talk today about pricing, food pricing for startups. I've worked with over 100 food businesses directly, helping them write business plans, get financing, etc. So work with a number of food companies on this kinds of issues. Okay, so normally if I do an advanced pricing seminar with my clients or with groups of clients, and we cover these 6 things that you see here. This normally can run anywhere from 6 hours to 2 full days when I'll work with 8 or 10 companies and do exercises across all these. But these 6 things that I list here are a big reason why a lot of food startups fail. And we're really going to focus only on numbers 2 and 3 today. So we're going to move through this kind of quickly, and then we're going to open up to questions. So the first thing that I always hear, I mean, I've probably, not even counting the 100 or so food companies I've worked with directly, I talk to hundreds of food startups every year, and inevitably about 95% of the people tell me this, that once their volume goes up, they get their costs down, then they're going to be profitable. But the problem most of us have is we really don't plan for, as we get going, our costs continue to go up as we scale. So think of yourself, maybe someone's making salsa or something like that out of their home to begin with, and they're shipping maybe 100 bottles of salsa that they sell at some farmers markets and things like that. And they say, hey, this is working really well. If I could do more, I could probably do 1,000 bottles of this. I could hit 4 more farmers markets a month, and I could probably sell 1,000 bottles worth of this. But to do that, because they can't produce 1,000 bottles out of their home, they need to go and, for the first time ever, go rent a kitchen, right? So maybe they part-time rent 2 days a week. The problem they have is they're still only selling 100 bottles right now, but their costs have gone drastically up to use this. So now they've got to get up to 200, 300, 400 bottles before their profit starts again. Now they start to feel pretty good and get up to about 700 or 800 bottles because now they're doing more and more things until they hit this point and say, oh my God, we're doing almost 1,000 bottles, but I've got all these great opportunities coming in and I'm not really making enough money to go full time at this. So now the next phase comes. Now I need to get my own kitchen. So maybe I'm going to go rent a kitchen. I don't need to build one out yet, but maybe I'm renting one from an old restaurant that no longer is working, or some church that's no longer a church, but I've got a commercial kitchen now and it's full time, but I'm still only selling 1,000 bottles a month. But now I've doubled my overhead, or maybe even more, just to get this out there. So at 1,000 bottles, I say, okay, now I got to get up to about 4,000 bottles before I'm feeling like I'm making profit again. Then I've got about 9 months where I'm feeling pretty good. And I say, oh my gosh, I'm getting up to 10,000 bottles a month. But man, now I've got UNFI who's banging down my door telling me they can sell my product, but I'm going to need to be able to ship a lot more, and I'm going to have to get ready again. So sure enough, again, we need to go out and spend more money. And we basically just keep on going up this stairway every single time. And you really can't shortcut this. I mean, a few can, of course, you can raise some money here and get all the way to here, but every time we do it. So, and one of the things that happens is there's usually a time lag here. So when people are about here, they're really not realizing in 9 months, they're going to have the same problem again. So what we need to do is just sort of plan for this ahead of time. And this is usually what the finance person in the business should be doing, because every time we go up a stair step, getting the money is harder and harder, right? Going from your house to the commercial kitchen or to the rental kitchen, not too bad. But getting to your first commercial kitchen that you're renting, usually you need to show a landlord that you're successful enough to be able to pay the rent. You might need to get a couple of custom pieces of equipment. So every time it takes longer and longer to raise the money. To go from the rented kitchen to building out your own in maybe a rented space in an industrial complex can go from maybe $10,000 to get this one up and running to $100,000 to get that one up and running. So every time the process of getting money takes longer and longer as well. So you just need to plan that you're always going to be sort of in this and know that going in. The other big thing that we work with is the big dream when people start their food businesses almost always is they want to see their product in the shelves of large grocery chains. And this is where really the pricing piece of it really shines. So this model, the innovation adoption lifecycle, really started in the high tech field, but it also applies to us as food businesses. So really what this says is any technology, really any new product has a set of innovators and early adopters. A good one to think of is cell phones, right? In the very beginning, cell phones, very few people had them. They cost a lot of money. They worked really terribly, but the people that really wanted them. And the early adopters really benefited from the innovators paying for the mistakes. But then all of a sudden, cell phones and very quickly, cell phones went from things that anybody could get or that only a few people were using. Then they became affordable. And all of a sudden, before you knew it, everyone had them, right? And a good example right now that's happening is electric cars. Electric cars are about here and just entering here. But the big chasm is we really don't have infrastructure for electric cars. It takes years to develop a manufacturing facility and manufacturing. So the chasm exists in multiple ways. Some of it is marketing. Early majority and late majority have completely different needs than innovators and early adopters. So I want to think about this now in some food examples, right? One that I like to use for this is quinoa or quinoa, however you like to pronounce it. And in the early days, it took a long time. Quinoa was in health food stores for a very long time before it sort of jumped. And now it's sitting here where there's it's known in America, but everybody's not buying it yet. The early majority and late majority still need more social proof. They need more infrastructure, in this case, like recipes that they can use or things they can make easily. So quinoa is one good example. I have a keto dessert cookies are another good example that sort of started here with the innovators and early adopters almost exclusively on social media. Now they're starting to come in and you're starting to see them in maybe at Trader Joe's or something like that. So the key is when we're early in, the early market is willing to pay more money almost always and is willing to put up with some mistakes and maybe not as nice packaging for interesting things. So how do we attack these markets? Well, early on, we can go to farmers markets, but social media is a great way. If you're creating any sort of artisanal product, almost by definition, you're doing something different and interesting. And the majorities shy away from different and interesting. They need the early adopters to give them permission. So social media is a great way. Specialty grocery stores are another good way to get into the hands of your market if it's something that the market specializes in. Another one would be ethnic markets for products that maybe come from a specific country that is new to the US but exists in another country. Another really great one is partnerships. I worked with a cheese company that had a really interesting and yet very expensive cheese. They teamed with a wine company, and the customers of the wine company would hold wine and cheese parties, and that would introduce this early adopter innovator audience who would then want to have the cheese at their dinner parties because it was so unusual. So another way to market to this audience is social media influencers. So lots of different ways, but the key is what most people do is they try to market all the way across and get everyone to see and buy their product. And it's actually the exact opposite of what needs to be done. It's all about the focus. Now, as products start to become more and more popular, and this is a good example where the keto cookies are coming in, like you start to see keto desserts now in a Trader Joe's or a Whole Foods. Sort of this is where the earliest of the early adopters come in. Then we start going into places like Wegmans, Publix, and as we move down the graph farther and farther, by the time it's all done, things are in Family Dollar, right? You can probably get I don't know, but I'm guessing you can get a burner cell phone in Family Dollar now for a couple of bucks. So this is the life cycle. And the key is when we're in the early phase of our business, we can't ship that much. The infrastructure it takes to ship to these guys is very expensive. So the disconnect that usually exists is when we start, this is our dream, right? But the problem is, in order to be able to ship to these guys profitably, we need to be way up along our stair steppers, but most of us are actually here. And one of the challenges is most of us get a sales opportunity for a big store. If we're doing a decent job fairly early, you might hear, oh, Whole Foods wants to put me all the way across New England, or Hannaford's or Shaw's has invited me to come in and be on their shelves. But almost always, unless our packaging is supremely good, our product isn't ready for that audience because the audience that's in Shaw's is here and our product is sitting here. So what happens? We spend a lot of money and waste a lot of time trying to get into these bigger grocery stores when really the place where we're really going to make our money is here. So that's kind of the 10-second tour, the 10-minute tour, I guess, of of really what can get covered in a couple of days to really focus on how to do our pricing in such a way that we stay profitable. As Carol said, I've set up about 8 or 10 hours next week. I'm actually, the rest of this coming week, I'm going to be away visiting family for the first time since COVID started. So really excited about that. And, but I've got some time next week, or you can always email me. And if you want to talk more about this or really anything else around finances in your business and raising money and how to keep your books and things like that, I'd be happy to talk to anyone, forecasting, etc.
Thank you, Jim, for this really insightful presentation, and very, very short and concise, but very insightful. We're going to open it up to questions now. So there are two ways you guys can ask questions. You can either raise your hand by clicking on the reactions icon on the bottom bar and raising your hand, and I can call you out, or you can just drop your question in the chat if you'd rather I relay the question directly to Jim. We also have a couple of questions that were submitted in the registration form. So I'm going to go ahead and kick off the session with a question that was submitted previously ahead of time. And I believe it's a question that many of you are interested in, but how to price, Jim, how can we price CPG products, and what should and should not be included in the cost of goods sold? And do any of the following elements get prioritized when calculating product costs? So ingredients used, origin location of the product, and ethics of the manufacturing process.
Okay. Should I stop sharing before I get to that? Yes? Okay. Okay, there was a lot in that question. So I think I heard a couple different things. One was just what should be included in cost of goods sold. But then I think I also heard how we prioritize things. And can you say that part again, Carol?
Yes, so when calculating product costs, does one of the following elements usually get prioritized? Ingredients used, origin location of the product, and the ethics of the manufacturing process.
So I'd say there's a couple different ways of looking at this, right? So first of all, in cost of goods sold, you're including usually the only thing that there's a couple different things that can be variable and a few things that are very specific. So first of all, ingredients and packaging always go straight to cost of goods sold. Where it can get confusing is labor and rent. So when you're at that early phase of the stair steps that I gave, you're only, for instance, you only have your kitchen during times of production. So it's really easy to show that as cost of goods sold. By the time you're 3 steps up, now it's really in your overhead as rent or as a loan. So those things are often different, but ingredients and packaging are always in there. And then there really is no priority as long as you're consistent about what you're doing. So another thing that often I see that I really don't like the way it's applied, and there are no very specific right or wrong answers to this. But for instance, if there's a commissioned salesperson or a broker selling your product, I like to see that in the cost of goods sold, because that's not an expense you would have if you didn't sell the product. Now, most companies put it under personnel and salaries, which is really where I believe it doesn't belong. So what you want to do is you want to truly reflect what's happening. Country of origin really doesn't come into the cost of goods sold. Now, you may say, I'm choosing to pay more for my cost of goods sold because I want it to come from these specific places that have an ethical, that have a more ethical labor and environmental record. And that, of course, is a great thing to do. That is really where branding and finance come together. Because if it's your brand to do that, and it's very smart to do it that way, if it's your brand to do that, it's where branding and finance really come together. But you don't prioritize them per se.
May I follow up on that, Carol?
Yes, go ahead, Irene.
Cost of goods question. Jim, thank you very much for your presentation. You were talking my language because I used to work in tech. Now, what about in our cost of goods, all of the R&D that we've got to partake in, meaning making sure the pasteurization methods, your shelf-stable activities. So many of us have to go to Cornell at some point. What about all of those details that go into making sure that food safety is a priority?
Yeah, that really is an overhead cost as opposed to a cost of goods sold. It gets spread over, right? Because when you go to Cornell, let's say that your facility is ready to produce 10,000 units of whatever it is you produce, and there's going to be different procedures you need to do when you have 10,000 units versus 100,000. So when you go to Cornell to do that, once you've done it once, that cost gets spread across whether you sell 10,000 units or 100,000 units out of that facility. So that goes to overhead from a finance perspective, just purely how you write your statements. That's all overhead. That's not in cost of goods sold.
Interesting.
Okay. Who would like to ask a question? Feel free to raise your hand or to submit your question via the chat. We do have a question that came in through the chat. So is it better to focus on fewer products with larger stock or multiple products with fewer stock when you are trying to introduce a new product line to the market, when you are focusing on the early adopter market or the early adopters?
So there's always going to be outliers. I had a client actually. So a couple different things on this, especially if you already have 10 or 20 products. I've worked with small companies that were only, $100,000 or $120,000 in sales and had 20 different product lines, which was way too much. But the most interesting thing I found was they had no idea which ones they made the most profit on. They couldn't tell me this one for a 6-ounce bag costs us $1 and this one costs us $3. They literally couldn't do that. So first, you want to just be keeping these statistics and data early, but also in general, now there's always going to be an exception to a rule, but in general, fewer is better. When you're small, focus, 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 focus. So the short answer to that is fewer. But finding your audience, finding the audience is the hard part here. So if you know who your audience is already, the better chance of success isn't to create something and go find an audience. It's to find an audience, then create something, right? So I like to look at the keto audience or the gluten-free audience and say, what's missing for that audience? That's why desserts have all of a sudden become popular. You could have gotten other keto foods 5 or 6 years ago. Now they're starting to come on with desserts in the same way that, well, for those of us that are old enough to remember when low fat was the popular diet, all of a sudden like Snackwell's cookies were out there like crazy. So if you have the opportunity and you know who your audience is already, find out from them what they want and see if you can go build that.
We received a question about pricing for e-commerce versus retail. So how would you advise startups go about pricing for those two different channels?
Well, so in general, I and most investors like to see your cost of production at 20 to 25% of the total retail sales price. What you don't want to be, so depending on how you're selling and what your strategy is, if you're selling on shelves and you're selling through partners, you don't want to have a lower price online than your retailers have, because that'll make your retailers really quite angry. So you need to determine the price that you can make a good profit at and make that your list price. Whether there's a different strategy, I mean, generally you can, if you're selling through Amazon on a food product, you're going to have pretty high costs. So you just need to make sure there's enough profit in there, which is why investors like to see a 20 to 25% cost of goods sold relative to list price, because by the time you get to those higher steps in that example, you're going to be often having to pay a distributor. You're going to have to be giving discounts to the distributor and to the retailer at a minimum. So it's got to go through several channels. So.
And Jim, speaking of retailers and distributors, can you talk a little bit about the percentage margin that entrepreneurs should set aside for each of the distributor and the retailer?
So distributors generally, it's 20 to 30%, and the retailers like to get 40% margin. Now, that doesn't mean they're always going to get it. And this is one of those things where, this again is where finance and branding come together. If you've got a strong enough brand, you've got some leverage with the retailers and the distributors. So for distributors, one of the challenges with a lot of early stage food businesses is there's a feeling that, if I could get a distributor, the distributor is going to go out and sell my product to the retailers. And 90% of the time, that's not true. Unless you've got a recognized brand, a distributor salesperson, I walk in with my bag of tricks to a store, I've got thousands of products or 1,000 products that I'm representing. So almost never am I going to focus on yours unless you've given me a good reason to do so. What distributors are good at is logistics and holding inventory. So there's a good reason to use them, but they're not going to be your salesperson. So 20 to 30% for distributors, up to 40% for retailers in terms of the margins they want. And if your brand is strong, you'll be able to bring those numbers down.
And do you have any advice on how entrepreneurs can navigate the higher rates of distributors for specialty stores?
The higher rates meaning the higher margins that they want?
I'm not sure. I'm assuming.
Okay. So if distributors want higher margins, these things are, unless you're selling alcohol, well, different states are different, but in most states, unless you're selling alcohol, distributors are in competition with each other. If you're small enough that you're working primarily with specialty grocery stores, I really recommend direct sales if you can do it. Now, the challenge of that is now you've got a delivery responsibility, and using distributors for delivery responsibility, that's a good thing to have. So you have to kind of figure out, every company's different, right? What of these are important to you? But again, it kind of comes back to brand and your ability to sell. If you've got the staffing to be able to say, I want to have my sales rep ride with your sales rep once a week, right? Well, now the distributor's motivated because they love the distributors like it when a manufacturer can send somebody out with them and have them help sell.
You have a
Well,
question?
you've got to, if you want to, another challenge that I see a lot with the startups is really understanding who your customer is. And yes, your customer is the end user, but if you're selling through distributors, your distributor gives you money. They're your customer as well. So if you want to get leverage with distributors or get a better price or a better margin, then you have to think of what value you can bring to the distributor that your competition is not bringing. So if you're just shipping boxes to a distributor, you need to be doing more. Can you go out and get marketing dollars, for instance, that you can bring to the distributor from one of your suppliers, for example? So you got to find ways to deliver value to your distributors if you want to bring down their price.
And Jim, can you please specify whether the margin that you're talking about includes the rebate programs as well?
It does not. So cost rebate programs, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's where it is. Whoever is asking that question, if you be more specific on that, because there are lots of different rebate programs going all different ways. Is that coming in the chat?
Yes. from Yogi.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Hi. So we sell gluten-free candy, and so we come across quite a few instances when we were reaching out to distributors such as Cormark that would ask us to, be part of their rebate program or their or UNFI that also has their own marketing programs. So when we price our product, we also have to take those costs into consideration. So I was just wondering if the 20% distributor margin or the 40% retailer margin, does that include, these programs as well?
So yes, it does. Really, in the end, what you need to look at is your true cost of sales, and I would include those. I would include those costs. Yeah, yes. So are the UNFIs and these other distributors, are they telling you that they want, if they're giving a rebate to their customer, they want you to eat that rebate?
That's right. Yes.
And are those incentive rebates, or are those for a product that they just have to return? They're not selling.
One, it's a part of it is the product that doesn't sell. They ask us to take 50% on it. Sometimes they would ask us to be part of their marketing programs or certain discounts that they would offer to retailers. So all of that as well.
Right. So I always put all that money into that, right? I look at my cost of sale more important than necessarily my percentage, although they're always related. But you need to consider all your costs when you're looking at your sell through. And this is exactly why, as you look at that stair step, when you're small and UNFI is pushing you to give these rebates, you probably aren't there yet where you're selling, where you've got a 25% cost of production relative to full price. I mean, you got to get a lot of scale to get there. And this is why almost always when people tell me, that I hate to burst their bubble, but they'll come in and say, oh my God, I've got an appointment with UNFI. This is the greatest thing in the world. And 8 out of 10 times, it's actually the worst thing that's going to happen to them. They just haven't seen it yet because they don't know all the pressure that's going to come from a UNFI to get their product out there. And there's always an outlier. I'm sure somebody here knows somebody that got the UNFI contract when they were only doing 5,000 a month and it worked. But in general, if you get in with a distributor too soon, statistically, it's more of a problem than a solution.
Good to know. Thank you.
We have a question from Jeff. Jeff, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Jim, and thank you for letting me be here. We're early startup. We're in the quiet phase, but we're launching a soup company in the fall, and we do a lot of, very small tasting sellings. But now comes the time that we need to get nutritional information for our 3 main soups. That's all we're going to have, and then a 4th soup that's going to change on a monthly level. How do I get that nutritional information, and ballpark, how expensive is it so I can budget it properly?
So the really fast and easy way is there's a program called Recipal, and you can put your ingredients in there for free, and you actually could produce your nutrition label for free out of Recipal. So just FYI, I am not an expert on the safety side of this at all. So that is purely a labeling packaging piece of information. There's also, the process that Irene had mentioned where, you have to go to Cornell or some other place to get certified that your process itself is safe. And again, safety is not my area of expertise. So I just happen to know that Recipal will do that for you, and I've used it with my clients.
Jim, we have a couple of questions about the step diagram. So go back.
I can bring it back up. Want me to bring it back up?
If you'd like, I'll ask the question in the meantime. So you did not mention co-packing as a way to avoid capital costs. What thoughts do you have on when or how to use a co-packer instead of building your own kitchen?
Yeah, and that is a great question, because I actually, unlike some, I am not against co-packing. So I I really like the idea of co-packing. Now I had a client in my accelerator who went to co-packing very early, and they were good at branding, but by the time the co-packer everything got paid, their cost of goods sold was 80% of the retail price. So it was hard for them to make money. So I am definitely not against I encourage co-packing actually. Like I don't think maybe going to here, I would never personally probably go to here if I could find a co-packer that had good enough quality. The challenge you have is up until what I would call these first 3 steps. Remember, this is you're out of your house. This is a rented kitchen for a couple days a week. This is a full-time kitchen rented that maybe you're renting that already existed. So it's probably not too giant. At those levels, getting a co-packer that's going to give you enough attention to make your product in a way that has high quality is almost impossible unless you've got the most super simple product in the world. So I think using a co-packer is a great idea once you get to a high enough volume that you can get a co-packer that will support you with the level of quality that you need. But when you're small, that's usually either too expensive or just impossible to find. Because when you think about what a co-packer does, when a co-packer has to work on your product, they need to shut down the line, clean everything completely clean, rearrange whatever packaging machinery they have, whatever other machinery they need to use for your specific process. So their overhead is very high and they need to make their profit. So I think co-packing is a great idea. I just, for companies at this stage, and Branch Food is really an entrepreneurship center. So I'm sort of working statistically that I'm guessing 80% of the people on the call are in these 3 areas here. I've never seen a scenario where a co-packer truly worked for someone at that early phase. And again, I'm sure there's an outlier out there, but statistically it's very hard to do.
May I follow up on that outsourcing question?
Please.
How about the need to go HPP early? Because many of my fellow like juice, tea, or some kind of like fruit-based beverages, they're really looking at HPP, and also many of us have been recommended to check out HPP. Is it advisable for us to think about HPPing on the second ladder or the second step?
So I don't know what the term HPP means.
I'm sorry, high pressure pasteurization.
Oh, okay. Again, I really don't work on the chemical side of this, so I really don't know.
Okay.
I haven't had any customers that I've worked so closely with that have been involved in that. So I just don't know the answer to that. I have no background for that right now, I'm afraid.
No problem. Good answer.
I can find out, but I don't know.
Jim, we got a question from someone watching us on YouTube. So the question is, how effective is sampling against coupons in customer acquisition? And do you typically price this into your retail price or take a one-time hit?
So that's a great question. So sampling is one of these weird things, and I haven't actually. There was another Branch Food session like this, I think, a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't able to attend, and I hope I can find it in the background catalog, the back catalog, because there was a session like this on sampling only a couple of weeks ago. So sampling is wonderful. Sampling is probably the best thing you can do, quite honestly. Now, with COVID, sampling has been really difficult. So I do know sampling was probably the best strategy I had before COVID for getting your stuff out there. And a lot of stores love it when you do it. It's just a wonderful thing. In terms of, do I count the cost or take it as a one-time hit? Even if it's a one-time hit, it's still a cost. You have to recognize the cost. And this is one of those things that not recognizing that cost is one of those things that causes companies or CEOs or founders or owners to scratch their head and say, wait a minute, I thought I was making money, but I don't seem to be making as much money as I think I should be making. Because when you take a one-time hit, you're really not recognizing it anywhere. So I have a whole other one-day course that I do that talks about really truly understanding your cost of sales. And sampling is a great example of a cost of sales. And you should do it, and you should include it in your cost of sales so you know what you have to spend to get it out there. But I love sampling. If you can do sampling, what I know some people are doing now for sampling is they're basically packaging in very small packages. So whether it's a granola or a juice, they're basically going to the store with hundreds of prepackaged little plastic things, which is, I hate all the plastic that's getting used, but so this way they're able to give samples without breathing on anything, essentially. So that's one thing I know that's happening. So I think a direct answer to your question is love sampling. Yes, include the cost of having someone standing there doing the sampling, even if it's you. Don't forget to record your cost because eventually you're going to have to pay somebody else to do that.
We got another question via the chat. When selling a premium product, is it more important to gain brand recognition or adoption and then raise prices, or should you start out with high prices and simply focus on adoption at that price?
Well, the market's going to tell you what they're willing to pay. The question is, how long can you last trying to figure that out, right? So if I've got sort of unlimited time, let's say I've got a spouse that really is supporting the day-to-day of the house and I don't need to make a lot of money for a long time, I've got more time to test which of those things is going to work. There isn't really a formula that says, you almost want to never raise price later, right? If you look at the adoption life cycle, the more people you've got that are interested in your product, unless you're a very high-end premium product, the harder it's going to be to raise price. It's almost impossible to raise price later. You always have to start high with the right target. So start high and target who you can, right? I mean, look at, Tesla's first car cost $100,000. They were really good at targeting. And I've got another customer that makes chocolate bars, and they sell a $20 chocolate bar. And it sits on a charcuterie plate with cheese and cured meats. How do they find people that want to put a $20 chocolate bar on a charcuterie? Right? But they keep that price high, and their intent is to keep that price high. They never are going to be a large seller of chocolate bars. They're always going to sell very few at a high price. And that's just the choice they've made.
Okay. Another question that we received is, any indication for cost of working with ghost kitchens as they emerge?
Could you ask it again? I didn't hear the very beginning.
Any indication for cost of working with ghost kitchens as they emerge? And I'm not sure if CPG products would end up being manufactured in ghost kitchens, but you know better.
So, I mean, ghost kitchens will probably increase the overall inventory of kitchens in urban areas. So on the upside, if someone opens a ghost kitchen and their company goes under, that's just going to be that many more kitchens available that you can rent. So that's good. Could you use share space with the ghost kitchen as a either to produce there yourself or have the staff of the ghost kitchen be a co-packer? I mean, it's really hard to tell what's going to happen there. I'm having trouble seeing a strong integration of packaged foods products and ghost kitchens, which primarily exist to make and serve immediately. That doesn't mean there's not going to be a integration somehow. I'm just not seeing it yet.
Okay, we have Jelena. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You'd like to ask a question. Go ahead.
Yes, that's right. So, Jim, you mentioned earlier that if we are selling products on our website and also through retailer, we should not have lower price. But what if we sell like bulky products, or if our retailers are selling like units and then we sell like 4 or like 12 units and we have like discounted price on that, or let's say like 20% if you're buying from our website, would that be okay?
So really what really matters is your relationships with your retailers and where you see the future of your company going. So in general, if you're offering discounts for volume, I don't see that as terrible, but what I don't know, and maybe you can tell me about your relationships with your retailers. I mean, do you have hundreds of them that you don't know personally and a very busy website? Do you have 3 retailers right now that are in a relatively small location, so you've got a tight relationship with them? Tell me about your business.
So I'm in the very beginning phase, and I did not start selling yet. I'm building my website, and I'm talking to one retailer right now. And I'm just thinking of how should I establish my prices, because I would like to offer to my customers like kind of subscriptions. I'm making frozen desserts that are like meal replacements, and then if they subscribe on like, let's say like package of 12 cups a month or 16 cups a month, that would be like lower price than buying 16 cups per price per unit.
So in general, I don't see, I mean, you'll find out by talking to your retailer. And if you've only got one retailer and you're just getting started, I would talk to your retailer about what you're doing so you're all on the same page. Normally, I wouldn't see that as a big issue. What's ringing for me whenever anybody tells me they're going to sell and ship a frozen product is make sure you truly understand your shipping costs, because it's really hard to ship frozen product. And you need to understand your costs on that. From a consumer perspective, even if they're getting a better price on product, by the time they pay for shipping, it's still hard to make that work. But if you're only in one store and you're just getting started, if your niche is such that you can sell all over the country and you do have a way to ship, go for it, because the people that are going to be ordering are not the people that are going to be going into your retailer's store.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And you could even cut a deal with your retailer and say, I won't ship to anybody in this zip code. I mean, you're really early, so you've got a lot of freedom there.
Yes. And I was only like I wasn't thinking of like shipping, more like doing local delivery.
Okay.
For now. Yeah. So that would be.
Yeah. Maybe exclude her zip code or his zip code.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question that we received, Jim, is how to set the minimum case order that a grocery store should buy from an entrepreneur or a product.
How to set it. So again, this sort of comes back to cost of sales. How hard is it for you to work with that retailer? How much product is moving through there? So you don't want them ordering one case and then you have to one case at a time, and then you've got to deliver 3 or 4 times a week, right? So it has to do with cost of delivery, really, more than anything else. So number one, if you're selling through distributors, that's going to be a different thing. Really, it's up to the distributor to work with that. If you're doing your own delivery or you're paying for your own delivery, you really need to look at your delivery costs and basically look at the profit per case and make that your minimum based on the number of times per week or month you're willing to travel, and look at the store's ability just to maintain inventory. If they're moving a case a day, but they don't have any space to store anything more, maybe you need to find a way to work with them to put storage somewhere closer. Is it a refrigerated good? There's several variables there. So, I guess I would need to know sort of how many retailers are we talking about, because it's very different if you've got 50 retailers across Massachusetts to set a policy than if you've got one or two customers and you can really customize it. When I say customers, I mean stores, and you really can customize for them.
And
Jim, it's about your delivery costs and profit per case. That's how you want to determine in general what you're willing to do, and start with that as your baseline.
And Jim, what would you say is a good target profit margin for wholesale?
For wholesale, so wholesale, they're going. I would say a 20 to 30% profit margin is good for wholesale, because then you're moving high volume, right? If you've got wholesalers that are moving a lot, you've got a very low cost of sales. And really, what I think, one of the things that I think financial systems in general haven't done a great job of doing, and one of the things I really try to work with my customers with, is understanding their cost of sales, because that's really where you're getting a lot of your profit.
Another question we received, it was submitted ahead of time. I am unable to compete with the price on the price with competitors. Should we lose money and still compete head on, or rather highlight how we distinguish ourselves? Well,
You definitely want to highlight how you distinguish yourself. Otherwise, you're going to go out of business if you can't compete there. If you were working with me sort of on a longer term basis, I'd be looking at how long is your runway for you to allow yourself to build your brand in such a way that you can get that higher price. Or another option, do you need a change in sales channel? I had a great client I was working with. It was pre-COVID, but she had an ice cream business, a gourmet ice cream business, and she was determined never to sell in stores. So she was only going to sell direct. She was either going to ship it or she was going to sell it direct. And she had 5 or 6 trucks, and in the summertime, every truck was busy going to festivals and fairs and farmers markets and anything happening outdoors, basically, for six or 7 months of the year. And she had a $750,000 business. She did not sell anything where she did not sell direct to consumers. So, maybe it's the channel. But again, if I were working with you directly, the first thing I'd be looking at is your runway, because you're going to be losing money for a while until you figure out either the right channel or the right branding. So if your runway is short, that's a challenge. If you've got some runway, don't keep selling based on price to the same customer that you can't win in, because just question how long will it take you to not win anymore.
We have a question from Dave Bork. Do you want to unmute yourself, Dave?
Yes, Jim. I'm a consultant at Fork Food Lab in Portland, Maine.
Oh.
And we've noticed that we have a lot of new members who are achieving quite a bit of success selling direct to consumer using web-based ordering. I just want to get your thoughts on that, because it seems like a very effective way to build your brand, and at the same way test things, and at some point in the future pivot more to retail, but to build your brand, build your company, and then pivot to retail, which to me seems to be a heck of a lot more difficult than selling direct to consumer. Can you comment on that, please?
I would say so. My comment is this on the. So I'd say people of, I will use the term our generation, find it much harder to sell via web to consumers than people of, for instance, Sarah's generation. There's just, I believe that's part of a generation gap, number one, because what we're seeing is people being successful at it. People that know how to do it are very successful at it. And if you can build a brand online, now you've got leverage when you're ready to go to retail. I mean, why even go to retail? Like, is there a reason to go to retail? I don't know. But we are definitely seeing, I've had customers that, selling things online that I can't believe they're able to sell so much of, like granola, like aren't all granolas similar? And yet I've got a client that had a strong granola company and is just getting stronger. And now she's up to like 35 or 40% of her sales are purely online. So if you're good at selling online, sell online for as long as you can, because the profit margin generally is good, unless you're paying too much for a customer. But that's a fixable thing. One of the great things about selling online is you can see how much it costs you per click to get all the way to the customer level, and you can see your cost of customer acquisition.
Jim, just a follow-up question on that. With Amazon offering free delivery for, if you're not a Prime member, I should qualify, for orders over $35, what advice would you give to companies that want to follow that direct-to-consumer regarding free shipping?
So eventually shipping gets paid for. So I think if I'm hearing you correctly, are you asking what if they want to go direct to consumer but don't want to go through Amazon?
No, I'm not asking that at all. In fact, I would definitely consider using dual channels, meaning set up your own website and at the same time sell on Amazon too, especially if it's shelf-stable items. So my question was regarding free shipping, the question of free shipping. Obviously shipping is a cost and it has to be considered, but if you're selling your products online, it's really your only cost because you don't have any other markups. I've been advising clients to eat that.
Well, if they're
ship it free, that people love free, and
yeah,
it's a really small cost.
Dave, you cut out. You're now muted, but yeah, I'm with you there. If they can do free delivery and still have plenty of profit, I agree 100%. Think of it this way: if free shipping is the same as paying a distributor, maybe it works. Now with that, they've got to process every order. If you've got a shelf-stable product, then it probably makes sense to go to a fulfillment house. So lots of different ways to sort of skin that cat. But in general, yeah, figure out what your formulas are. Is free shipping worth it or not? Use the math. And if it is, then definitely offer it because it's going to increase your volume.
One of the things that I've been attending all the Branch Foods webinars. And when we did talk earlier about sampling, I recall one of the people speaking was doing all direct to consumer, and he was talking about how to do sampling, and that was very, very interesting. So I'm really learning an awful lot about how the feasibility of direct to consumer and how much easier that is right now than going the retail route. So yeah. I just commenting on that and just want to get your opinion.
I'm sort of with you on. I agree that it's really picking up steam, and exactly how that's happening. It sounds like potentially a good seminar topic to learn what people are doing that are going D2C and making it work. Because for every 10 that we see that are working, there may be 50 that are not working, or maybe not. I don't know the statistics there, but I'm with you there. I'd like to see what that is, and how is the person that's using sampling able to, sounds like she's selling over web. How's that sampling working? Is she shipping a free sample?
Yes, precisely. It's a very targeted approach. You have to know who your potential customers are.
Yeah.
And then you have to mail out free samples. But there are ways of doing that using social media.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking here. I actually had a client that made a candy bar, or it was actually more of a health snack bar, the kind of thing you use when you're hiking and things like that. And because of the way the pan was laid out, she ended up with a bunch of waste, and she actually turned the waste into 1 ounce bars and packaged them. Like, that would be a good example of something you could send out as a sample.
Exactly.
So, Dave, I'd like to come up and next time I'm up near Portland, come and see you and check out your place and talk about this more, actually.
Love to have you there.
Well, we're almost at time here. We are at time, actually. It's 5:01. Jim, any last thoughts or advice that you want to share with the audience here in terms of pricing for food startups?
I don't have any specific additional things I want to share. Just, thank everybody. It's, if there's 100 different companies, there's 100 different 100 different sort of problems to solve. So keep talking and keep networking, because all of us is smarter than any one of us.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, for your advice and for answering the questions today. We really appreciate your time and the advice that you shared with our audience. As a reminder, Jim has dedicated some time on his calendar next week to connect with you guys. If you'd like to follow up with him, we will send the link in the follow-up email tomorrow. We will also include the recording of the session. And if you have questions or want to reach out to Jim, we'll include his contact information too. And you can reach out to Branch Food at info@branchfood.com. And we thank you all for attending. Thanks again, Jim, for your support and for the very useful advice. And we hope to see you all soon. And in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks.